Hi, we are so happy to join the Earth Day virtual stage today, 2023. My name is Megan Pryce, and you may know me because I say funny things on TV. But today we are talking about food waste and the role that expiration dates play in our food waste problem. So I am going to introduce Emily Broadleaf. She is such a superstar, and they said she could introduce herself, but I don't think she's going to tell you how awesome she is. She's the clinical professor of law at Harvard University. She's the deputy director of the Harvard Law School Center for Health, Law, and Policy Innovation. And very exciting to me, she is the founder and director of the Harvard Law School Food, Law, and Policy Clinic, which is the first law school clinic in the nation devoted to finding solutions for all the challenges within the food system. I did not know what a law school clinic was, so I looked it up, and Emily, please correct me, but what it seems like to me is really experiential teaching. Like you teach these students and then they actively participate in helping to solve the problems in the food system. Is that kind of correct?
Yeah, exactly. So when I was a law student, I didn't realize, I went to law school wanting to be part of systems change, and there weren't the opportunities really to, kind of do work on the food system, which is what I'm leading, or also community-based work. And so I'm working with clients that are government, government officials, government agencies, community groups, nonprofits, social enterprise. Trying to help them better understand the laws or think about how to make the laws better. And I'm bringing students along every step of that way and teaching them how to really think about law as being a tool for change.
What a really different model, too, of education from just studying the concept of what the law is and actually actively participating. I mean, what a gift. I think I want to go back to school immediately. You've made such a difference throughout your career, which, there's so many different areas that I could go into that you have had direct impacts on. But most recently, I feel like your focus has been about the labeling to reduce food waste. So maybe you could explain kind of the scope of the food waste problem, because I really think that people don't really know, how massive it is.
Yeah. It's true. I'll just say on that point, it's been a big focus for us because there's so much opportunity for change. It has a huge impact on the environment, but also on people because we're throwing away all of this food that could be eaten. So it feels like just a really great way to spend our time. And there's so many creative solutions that are out there. In terms of the scale of food waste, globally, we waste about a third of all food produced around the whole world. In the US, estimates are that we waste between 35 and 40% of our food. And the impact of that is not only are we wasting all of the resources that go into that food, like in the US, more than 20% of all of our water goes to water crops that we basically just throw into the landfill. But also when food is in landfills, it's a big emitter of methane, which is a really powerful greenhouse gas. It has, in the short term, 80 times more impactful than carbon in the atmosphere. And estimates are that 8 to 10% of all global greenhouse gases come from food waste. So, we're wasting a lot of food, we're doing bad things to our resources, we're polluting. And then lastly, at the same time, there are a lot of people in need. More than 10% of the US population, billions of people around the globe that, a lot of this food is still safe, it's edible, it's delicious, it's wholesome, and it's thrown away because of, it's not perfect looking or it's surplus or the labels are misleading.
Well, and I think it's really important to point out too that when you say nationwide, it's not just in areas of our country that seem impoverished. I live in Santa Barbara, which Oprah lives in Santa Barbara, but we have a real food insecurity problem here. We volunteered recently. My family volunteered with a place called Path that serves homeless or underserved people, and they get donations from Whole Foods, Sprouts, and Trader Joe's. And when I was reading your study, I just thought, what a beautiful model. What a beautiful model that they get this beautiful food, which, because of the date on the label, which is pretty confusing to a lot of people, which leads me into the study that you guys did, the paper you published with the NRDC that really kind of laid out some ideas for how the labeling could be streamlined and consistent and explanatory instead of utterly confusing. So could you maybe talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, like I said, there's lots of reasons we waste food and there's lots of better things we can do with it. So I love your point about this is in everyone's backyard. This isn't somewhere far away from you. It's everywhere. And the reason we spend a lot of time looking at date labels is because it both reduces the amount of food that is able to be donated and also really leads to people wasting money, which again should matter to everyone, but especially for families who are really struggling to have enough money to buy food. When they're confused by these labels and they throw that food away, it's heartbreaking. So what we found was that there's really two big issues with the labels on food. The first is that the bulk of these labels, and so I know everyone can think of, it's the sell by, best by, use by, enjoy by labels on food.
Packed on, freshest by, like there's so many.
So many. There was a study that Walmart did a couple years ago, and they found 47 different labels were being used on their products in Walmart stores. So, good cocktail game. Like, can you think of 47 labels?
No.
They're sort of a madness. But by and large, the majority of these, almost all of them, are really about freshness and taste. And so the companies are saying, we want people to eat food when it tastes the best. And we're putting labels on for people to know that. But the majority of people, more than 90% of Americans, think that these labels are about safety. So that's the first issue. People are just like, I don't know what this means. When in doubt, throw it out. And they're throwing away, $1,500 for a family of four each year of needless food waste. And then the other issue is that they're not regulated by the federal government. So
that's insane to me. That's insane to me. Because if you look at a nutrition label and it says it has 9 grams of protein, it has 9 grams of protein. But these food safety labels aren't telling you if it's safe. They're telling you who knows what they're telling you.
Exactly. And that's actually why the federal government has chosen not to regulate them. They said these aren't about safety. It's not our problem. But so there's this mismatch between the reason they're doing what they're doing, which is, these are just about taste and what consumers get. And actually a lot of consumers believe that these are regulated by the federal government.
I did. I did before I studied your work. I did. I thought for sure there must be some rule if you're going to put a stamp on my food that comes from the FDA, right?
Yeah.
No.
Well, the craziest thing that we found was that because there's no federal law, states, usually like with nutrition labels, the federal government regulates, so states can't. But when there's no federal regulation, states can jump in. So what we found was 40 states have laws on this. 24 states prohibit or restrict the sale or donation of food after the date. But the kicker is that no two states have the same law. So these can't possibly be science-based, because if they were based in science, then everyone would be regulating the same way. So there's just this
also messes up, but that messes up, like, let's say a company like Trader Joe's, for example, wants to donate. They can't do the same thing in Texas that they can do in Oklahoma, that they can do in California, that they can't make a company policy.
100. We've said that too. It's like no one is benefiting from this system. So, we were scratching our heads about, how can this be this way? And, I have lots of thoughts on where we could go from here, but I think you're right. Like, companies aren't benefiting, consumers aren't benefiting. We talked to the food banks and food rescue organizations, and they said they also aren't able to pass food along because they don't know when this label's a safety risk and when it means just a quality label. And so it actually is harming them as well, because they're, kind of making decisions in the absence of good information.
So how do you do that? Can you make it that simple? Can you simplify it where it's like there is a red label that says use by, and there's a red label or green label that says taste yummiest by, which I would also argue is a matter of opinion.
I like your label, taste yummiest by. That is what we've been pushing for. And I will say it's exactly that, right? Like, if in an ideal world, there might be other things that would be, really nice to have on the label, but people just want it to be very simple. And I think the best thing we can do is sort of divide food in half. The foods that really are risky, put a use by is actually the label that we've pushed for, that we've worked with industry that they've said is, something that they can use. And that'll, in the other countries that have standard labels, it is use by is the label used for safety. So that would be on like deli meats, like, prepared foods that you get at the deli counter, unpasteurized cheese. There's just a very small handful of foods that actually like are riskier, and we should tell people that. And then the lion's share of food, 95% of food would have, we've said best if used by, which came from some consumer testing. And we'd be able to then educate people just that if you see that best if used by, it means as long as it tastes and smells fine, you will not get sick.
Oh,
Don't eat it if it
that's
looks
my
well.
test.
If it
That's
looks
always my
good,
test.
yeah, exactly. Like sniff test, taste test, and it's letting people know that with those foods, you're not gonna put yourself in harm's way by doing that. You don't need to eat something if it doesn't taste good, but as long as it's still fine, there's no reason to be worried.
Okay, so then I have a favor to ask you. Can you put out your own, like Emily Broad Loeb Dirty Dozen? You know how there's a dirty dozen in organics. We
Yeah,
always look for those. Like, I'm not going to buy strawberries for my kid that aren't organic, but I might buy a banana that's not organic. Like if it's a small group, like we could have the danger foods. Like these are the pathogen
yes.
carrying foods. Like, yes, be very careful around these. Because my mom growing up was like trichinosis, salmonella, you could get botulism. Like she would throw these words
Yeah.
around and we'd be scared of everything. But they're really, like you're saying, there really are a finite number of things that even carry harmful pathogens.
Totally. Well, I mean, I think it's really important for people to know. Of course, there are pathogens in food. They shouldn't be in there. No one's trying to have them in there, but you know, it's not that the length of time for most foods actually leads to getting sick, like with a foodborne illness. So there's a very small handful of foods that, and again, I'm a lawyer. I'm not a food scientist, but we've vetted this with food scientists, so I feel very confident saying it. It's foods that could have been contaminated with listeria, which is the only pathogen that can still grow in refrigeration. And those are and it's a very, very small number of foods. And even with those, it doesn't mean it definitely is unsafe. It just means it's riskier. So I think that's
Right.
really important for people. And I think I mentioned the main ones that I know. So it's not even a dirty dozen. It's like a dirty half dozen. It's,
That's so easy.
yeah, deli. It's actually the foods. A lot of it is, the foods that doctors recommend that you don't eat if you're pregnant because of listeria is particularly a risk for pregnant women. So deli
Mhm.
meats, like, I have 2 kids. I remember a doctor says don't eat deli meats unless you microwave them, which, like, I don't know about you, but who microwaves their deli meats? But I guess that could make them safer. So deli meats, like raw fish, prepared tuna salad or egg salad that you bought at the store. I mentioned unpasteurized cheese or milk. But another really great one that comes up a lot that's a big overly wasted food is actually regular pasteurized milk. So when you and I go to the store, we buy milk, it's pasteurized. That means it was heated to a really high level. They killed all the bacteria in there. And, that milk is, no one wants to drink spoiled milk, but you're not going to, just because the date has passed, you are not going to get sick. We actually
It's not
made
going to hurt you. Yeah,
yeah,
it's not going to
we
hurt
made
you.
a film a few years ago where, in the presence of a food safety expert, we all drank milk that was 1 day past the date, 2 days past the date, 3 days past the date. Everyone was fine. I thought they all tasted fine. One person thought one of them was not as good, but he happened to be a super taster. But point
Mhm.
is, like, there's not a safety risk. It's just, you can use your senses with certain foods, and that's what I think ideally, like, we would be able to have that knowledge.
So I love that. I feel like all your work is basically designed to empower consumers. In my
Yes.
business, they say a lot of like, trust your audience, they'll get the joke. You want to trust your consumers, but they have to have the information in order to be empowered to make strong, healthy decisions. So I would say, like, in looking to people, like for myself, when I look at the food system, it becomes a little bit overwhelming. And what can I do? Me personally, I have chickens until they got eaten by a bear. I have a compost, like we grow our stuff. We're hippified. We're pretty good. But
Yeah.
what can I do to eliminate food waste? Like
Yeah.
and is there a resource? Can I go somewhere? Can I donate? Can I volunteer? How can I help?
Yeah, that's great. I will say one thing. So I teach law students about the laws regulating the food system, and we're constantly, on date labels, on other labels, we're constantly poking holes in things. And at the end, they say, Professor, what should I eat? And I'm like, I'm a law professor. I'm not a dietitian. So, but it can be confusing. Where do you get started? Like, what do you have control over? I would say on this, there's a few things. I mean, one big thing is you mentioned this earlier. There are opportunities in every community to be involved in this, and it takes a lot of hands on deck to, um, just thinking of the narrow issue of getting food rescued, getting food from places where there's surplus to get it to people who need it. Actually, Congress, the end of last year, passed a law expanding the protection that goes to businesses that donate their surplus food. So they already were protected, but they even made it bigger. Just saying, we really want when businesses and individuals and schools and institutions have extra food, there's
So they're
no
not
reason that
liable. Like
they're not
if
liable.
somebody were, they're not liable.
Yeah. So every, to the extent you have control over an institution that your workplace, your school, whatever, get them involved, ask them what they're doing with extra food at the end of the day or the end of the week, and help like play that role in volunteering. I think the second is education. So, we're talking date labels now. I think people hopefully will know there's a lot of foods you can eat after the date. Just smell them, taste them if they're, except for that small set of foods we talked about. But, tell your friends that and, understand really why you're wasting food and see what you can do to reduce it because you're not only contributing to the damage to the planet, but also wasting money, which no one wants to do. And then I would say advocate, Congress for the last few Congresses has been thinking about taking action on date labeling. There's an opportunity to talk to members of Congress about that. States, I mentioned, right now in the absence of federal law, all of these states have these crazy laws that aren't based in science. So there's opportunities at really different levels to try to fix this and make it clearer so that 10 years, 20 years from now, we're not wasting more and more food. We're really being more thoughtful, using the resources responsibly and, eating delicious food.
And I love that because it's apolitical. This issue supersedes political parties. It doesn't matter if you're Republican or Democrat or Green Party or independent or hate
Yeah.
politics in general. Like it's really above all of that. So I think it doesn't even matter which, what your beliefs are. Lobby everyone because it's
Yes.
really about all of us. We're all humans and we all eat food.
Yes, 100%. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I am like your biggest fan in the world because I feel like the work you do is a service. It's an absolute service, like to human beings, to animals, to the whole planet. I feel like what you do really helps everyone. So thank you. And thanks for
I appreciate it. Thank you. This was so lovely. And I want to hear more about your chickens and your volunteering and all those pieces too.
Okay. All right. We'll have to talk offline. Thank you.